This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, this is your host, Harry Wilkinson, and welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. This is the show where we take a look at current events, we take a look at the media, we take a look at health and politics and entertainment, everything that's out there, and we take a look at it from a spiritual perspective. We're trying to have a healthy outlook, a healthy way of interacting with all of the media and everything else out there that we must interact with on a daily basis as we go about our lives. And for many of us, we find it a little bit stressful. We find it a little bit stressful to turn on the news and hear about things blowing up and people being murdered and all of those things. So we need to find a way to intake that and understand what's going on a spiritual level so we can de-stress ourselves. And we've been talking about de-stressing, so in the spirit portion of our program, we will focus more on some stress-reducing techniques that can be helpful at this time of year. You know, this is autumn now. There's a lot of stress out there for parents bringing their children back to school, for students going back to school, for people in business, workers getting back to work after the summer. This transition from summer to fall, people don't really talk a lot about how stressful that is, but it is. It's a change. Summer, even if you're working all summer, or you get a week's vacation during the summer, there's a different vibe in the summertime. You have memories of summer when you were a kid, when you had free time. The weather is warmer in many parts of the country. It's a different vibe, a more relaxed vibe, and this transition to fall is often a transition back to a more formalized or more rigid set of schedules or what have you. So when that occurs, you know, there can be feelings of discontent, let's say, or just getting back into the swing of things can cause a lot of stress. So we're talking about stress reduction techniques. We'll get into that today. We'll also get into our segment, again, another segment on heroes of consciousness. We're going to talk about Hal Puthoff, a scientist who worked and continues to work quite a bit with something called the zero-point field. I think we talked about that on the show maybe last week, but it bears probably repeating and more in-depth discussion to understand it. Not saying that I understand it, not being a physicist. I have a limited, rudimentary understanding of what that means, but we'll talk about that too. But I wanted to get back to something I brought up on the show a few weeks back in regards to astrology. I often bring in astrology references on the show. I do believe it works. I do believe there is a causality or an interrelationship between our vibrations, the vibrations of the universe, and the planets and stars and how they align. It's something that's been around for centuries and more. Something that predates just about every other form of technology that we have, whether it's science, even predates most religions. It's something that the ancient Egyptians used. So, you know, you can feel how you feel about it. I don't exactly believe that, you know, the daily horoscopes you might read in the newspaper are much of anything. But I do believe that a real understanding of astrology helps. To my mind, something doesn't hang around that long unless it has some sort of relevance. So, in any case, I brought up the fact that we are going through a series of what they call squares. That's when planets are aligned sort of antagonistically against each other. that creates a tension between the two energies that each of those planets represents. So I talked about the fact that for the next 3 years or so, there are going to be 7 squares between the two planets, Uranus and Pluto. And Uranus, the energy that Uranus represents is the energy of idealism, of freedom of thought and speech, of progressive revolution, if you will, of uniqueness, of innovation. Aquarian energy allows us to create, to invent new things, to find new solutions to problems, and so forth and so on. Pluto represents the deepest, darkest powers within us, the ultimate powers, the bad boys, if you will, the ones you don't want to go up against. Consider the fact that when the planet Pluto was discovered in the 1930s, it was discovered around the same time as a very powerful element was discovered that led to the creation of the atom bomb, the discovery, and nuclear energy, the discovery of what they came to call plutonium, a very, very powerful energy that can cause literally complete destruction. So when you're talking about Pluto, you're talking about that kind of power, that kind of deep life or death kind of transformation. Pluto also, well, Pluto in mythology is the Lord of the underworld, the Lord of the dead. So Pluto has a lot to do with death and rebirth, the elimination of old things, and laying waste to the old so that the new can sort of arise. So Pluto can be quite a transformational planet, but it's not a fun planet, because for things to transform, quite often what is standing in the way of the transformation has to be eliminated, and that's kind of what Pluto is about. So in this contest between Uranus and Pluto, you're going to see, as several astrologers have told me, that through this period of 2012 to 2015, intense social protest, intense sort of energy between those that want a new way of doing things, that want revolution, and those that hold ultimate power or believe in ultimate power. And it takes many different forms. Well, we can see, quite honestly, around the world, how many different kinds of protests are going on. Now, we've talked, of course, about the protests that are going on around this anti-Muslim film that has sort of lit quite a political firestorm. We talked about that, we'll get back to that. But there are many other protests going on around the world that are important to look at. In South Africa, there are protests from the miners who are striking because they have been so completely underpaid, while the mining companies are making millions of dollars. And this stems from the history of apartheid in South Africa. Because, as you know, for many years, South African rule was completely white Danish Afrikaner variety, whereas the majority, which were black Africans, were subjugated, and they got the worst of everything. They got the worst housing, the worst education, they worked for slave wages. And when that ended, upon the release of Nelson Mandela in the early 90s, there were many changes that took place, and there was an expectation that now blacks would have more freedom, they would be able to participate more in society, and they would be able to gain greater wealth. Well, what's happening is that although the political structure of apartheid does not exist anymore, in some cases, particularly in the cases of these mines, the structure or the remnants of it still exists. So the poor miners that are, working for low wages are all black Africans, whereas the miners that own the mines tend to be white. Now, there are white miners too. It needs to be said that exists too. However, they tend to work in other mines, and not the ones where the working environment is so repressive. So again, you have this separation, and this protest on behalf of the miners is about going up against these powerful corporate interests that are running their lives and fighting for a new way of being, a new way of living, for greater prosperity, for greater health, for greater freedom, and so forth. That's going on in South Africa. In India, we have protests that have been continuing really since the spring about corruption, or anti-corruption, if you will, anti-corruption protests in India. These activists are fighting for a bill that will strengthen anti-corruption laws that are being proposed and are sorely needed in the government of India. Now in India, there are an awful lot of politicians and civil servants who are very corrupt. And this has been a very bad thing for India for a long time. India is trying to create a healthier democracy and a more active and vital economy. However, quite often funds and influence get funneled to corrupt politicians who keep the poorest of Indians from being able to participate in what should be a burgeoning society for everybody. And so, not knowing completely what Indian politics, or the structure of Indian politics as it is, I do know this much. I know that the ruling party, over which this anti-corruption bill is being, pushed, has still a stronghold on the government in India. And so we have that situation going on. And as I've mentioned before, we also have the situation throughout the Middle East of the protest against the anti-Muslim film. Now, this is, and some people have said to a degree, that these protests, which are happening not just in the Middle East, they're happening in North Africa, they're happening all over, are not so much about this one film, although there is anger and resentment, and rightfully so, about that film, which, if you haven't seen it, and I don't suggest that you subject yourself to it, but perhaps you might want to see a clip or two just to see how completely foul it really is. And it really is. It's shameful, and it's embarrassing that someone in our United States would see fit to create something like that, and to fool the people who worked on the film into thinking it was not as vile as it was. from what I understand of the actors involved in the film, they had no idea what he was really doing with this film. In fact, he dubbed over their voices to add in dialogue that was, uh, well, you just have to see it to see how offensive it really is. So it's understandable that the offense is there. However, there are suggestions that this is being used as a broader sort of platform for protests against what can only be called Western dominance. And this has been simmering for a very long time. We continue to, as a Western society, not only dominate their society in the fact that we come in militarily in places that perhaps we ought not to, but also just in our culture. It seems to seep through everything. And the protests are about these folks, particularly very devout Muslims, who are perhaps trying to hold on to an old sense of the way things were, used to be, should be. Desperately trying to hold on to their values as they see them and as they perceive them being eroded away by Western influence. It parallels, though perhaps not as strongly, but parallels the kinds of efforts that conservative Christians, particularly in this country, are involved in as we begin to progress and open up and allow more freedom for gays in the military, for instance, or gay marriage, as a more multi-ethnic culture emerges in the United States. And the dominance of the white European culture begins to start to take a downturn. We see a strong desire to hold on to those values. And these are said in many coded terms. I think it goes as far as, particularly if you want to talk politically about the Republican Party, you see a lot of that sort of rhetoric seep into, well, first all of the candidates who were vying for the, presidential nomination, and through Mitt Romney and his vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan, you hear this sort of coded language, which is really, we've got to take back America. We've got to, reinvigorate American values, and much of what they're talking about is this fear of there's clearly a transition going on. There's clearly changes going on. There are clearly more Asians and more Mexicans and more black people who are becoming more influential in American society. And as that continues to happen, there continues to be the reaction to it. And of course, we have the protesters in what they call themselves the Occupy movement, the 99%ers club, if you will, who are protesting the dominance of the 1% who hold the vast amount of wealth in this country. So back to the astrological aspect of this, you have the squares between Uranus and Pluto, and one word we're hearing an awful lot about in this country is the word plutocracy. Plutocracy, obviously very related to Pluto, means the ultimate power of a few who have all the money, who have all the access, who have all the influence. sounded the warnings. Many very reputable people, brilliant people, who believe that unless appropriate measures are taken, unless we do take a stand, we are moving towards a plutocracy in our country where the government is itself is run and ruled and only accessible to the very wealthy. And so I think throughout this period of the 3 years between 2012 and 2015, where we have these squares between Uranus and Pluto, we're going to hear a lot more of that word, plutocracy. So, on we go. Let's talk about a new topic now. Now that we talked about this deep and heavy stuff, it's time to do some relaxation, right? So, let's talk about ways to relax. Now, last time we talked about breathing as a stress reducer. All of these ways of reducing stress that I talk about all start with breathing. So, learning to pay attention to breathing is very important. It's the foundation of every other technique that you might want to use in bringing stress reduction to your life and so forth. Today we're going to talk about progressive relaxation. And this is a way that we relax our bodies by reducing the tension in the muscles and going through each part of our body to eliminate that. Now this is something that we use a lot in yoga class, and you may encounter it also in massage therapy, and there's a lot of variants on it. Basically what you do is you might want to lie on your back, you might want to sit comfortably in a chair. I myself like to lie on the floor and sort of feel myself connected to the ground and sort of melting into the ground. That's how I like to do it. That's a visual I use. But in any case, wherever you happen to be sitting, you start to take deep, slow breaths. And as you take each breath, you start to focus on one part of your body. And you become aware of any tension that might be there. Often, I know myself, I carry tension in my body through the course of the day that I get so used to, I don't even realize that I've got tension there until I stop, take some deep breaths, and scan my body to see where the tension is. I tense up sometimes around the neck and shoulders, and I don't even realize it until I calm down, take a step back. So you start to become aware of this tension, and then you breathe into it to release it. You take the deep breath, and you imagine breathing through that part of your body where you're experiencing the tension. Now, another thing you can do is to actually tense that area and relax it. That's helpful too. But you move on to the various parts of your body. You might start with the face, and then relax the face. Maybe tense the jaw and relax that. Go to the neck and your chest and see what kind of tension you might feel there. Those are big sources of tension, as I mentioned. And maybe your arms. Then you go into the abdomen. Then throughout the thighs and the lower legs, down to the feet and toes. And just start sorting out where you think the tension is. Now this can also be very effective if you happen to have particular aches and pains in a part of your body. You can go straight to that part of your body that is experiencing some pain or tension and communicate with it. Try to find out what it is that is troubling and breathe through it. It's great to lie or sit still with your eyes closed and focus on that. Focus on your breathing. And see what communicates to you about that part of your body which is feeling perhaps ill or stressed. See what communicates there. Let it talk to you. And continue your breathing. Now, you can also find, many different relaxation tapes that are available, or CDs that you can listen to while you're relaxing your body. Uh, there are many that are available. You can find them online. I'll be putting out a CD shortly of those kinds of guided meditations, and I'll certainly update you when they are available. But there are many other ways to do it too. There's music that you can use, instrumental, soothing music. That as long as it's something that you enjoy, don't put on music just because you think it's, stress reducing or spiritual. Because if you don't like it, if it's annoying to you, that's going to cause stress right away. Um, if the music of somebody like Enya or something you find a little bit treacly, then don't use it, because that's not going to relax you. It's just going to make you aware of how much you don't like the music you're listening to. So find something you like. I like sometimes to listen to Native American drumming. I like flute music too. I like a variety of things. Sometimes I'll listen to some popular music actually that are isn't too aggressive, but songs that I've enjoyed for a long time. Classical music sometimes can be a great stress reducer, but again, if you don't like classical or you find it a little bit boring, you might not want to go there. But in any case, progressive relaxation can really help during the stresses of the day. Okay, we've got about 2 minutes for me to get into our segment on Heroes of Consciousness, and we're talking about Harold is his full name, Harold E. Puthoff. He's an American physicist who has pioneered research in two areas. Gravitational physics, which is the physics of energy, how energy moves around, and work with the zero-point field. What is the zero-point field? Well, the zero-point field is, in physics theory, says that there is this low level of electromagnetic energy that sort of pervades everything. It's always there. It's sort of always on. Kind of like your internet access. It's always on, and you can tap into it whenever you want to. It's become controversial because a lot of physicists either don't accept its existence or don't feel like it's something that they can use. So Hal Puthoff has pioneered ways of perhaps using this zero-point field, and he has created Earth Tech International Incorporated. It's an organization that is investigating, these aspects and devices that may, over time, be able to point us to a way where we can use this ever-present energy as a way to power our lives, and not to have to rely on the more stringent or physical aspects of energy that we rely on now, such as coal, gas, even wind and solar. So he's pioneering in that sense, and he's also pioneered something that we call remote viewing. Remote viewing is a psychic ability. It's an ability to see from somewhere else. And it was a highly funded government program for quite some time. And Hal Puthoff was a leader in this government research. So next episode, we'll talk more about remote viewing and Hal Puthoff and his friends. But till then, farewell.